Dude, is literally like, this is from a time. It's crazy watching like Genghis Khan tactics being implemented with modern weapons. You know what I mean? Like the only country that does this is outside of Israel is like, I feel like it's. All right, here it is. Ethan Klein is wrong about Israeli society.
That's part of what unrest in Israel is about.
This has nothing to do with Ethan, by the way. He just uses Ethan as a drama farming operation. But in reality, it's a pretty. No, Ethan is only referenced once once in the beginning. Everybody f***ing shut up, okay? It's clickbait. He does not talk about Ethan at all. He just lays out a very convincing argument that compiles every single thing that I've talked about since October 7th about the Israeli society's attitude towards Palestinian death and destruction.
Wow,
it's
is
not
that a lot of
Ethan drama. Oh my God. It has nothing to do with Ethan. I'm just skipping the part with Ethan, okay? I'm just skipping it because some of you guys are so fucking stupid.
Klein appears to harbor contradictions. In his recent conversation with Sam Cedar of the Majority Report, he claims to have optimism with regard to Israeli society. Israelis do not wish death on Palestinian civilians. He claims this is evident in the protests in Israel for the end of hostilities in Gaza. Though in more casual conversation, he not only tolerates but appears to share a more jaded outlook.
The thing is, in Ramallah, there's a lot of, there's going to be like Hamas operatives and Islamic jihadists and stuff that live there.
Guy?
So I don't even know necessarily if it's like the ordinary people, but yeah, they'll kill you.
I just got out of the bathroom. What did I miss?
Whether sincere or not, I found his incredulousness at the notion of Israeli society supporting the killing of Palestinian civilians interesting. Following October 7th, what Americans could glean from reactions inside Israel to the carnage in Gaza was no less than completely horrifying. Members of the Knesset called for nuking Gaza. A prominent general wrote opinion pieces calling for inducing epidemics of disease and making the strip uninhabitable. Israel's finance minister shared the article and expressed his agreement. Israelis took to social media to mock Palestinians, gloating over their running water and electricity, which was cut off to Gaza. Though, for some reason, I held on to an assumption that these were narrow and incomplete glimpses into Israeli society. I suppose I had an optimistic view that Israelis would surely harbor a capacity for empathy with Palestinians, to some degree. What I saw in the spring of 2024 was therefore a gut punch. It was a report from Pew Research Center titled, Israeli Views of the Israel-Hamas War. I read it carefully, and a figure leaped out at me. Israeli Arabs, Palestinians, are much more likely than Jews.
This has nothing to do with Ethan Klein. I know the article title says Ethan Klein. He is using Ethan Klein as a narrative device. This entire video is about Israeli society's opinions on the campaign in Gaza. Please stop. This is literally, this is it. This is the only part that features Ethan Klein. The rest of the video is just about, Israeli society's point of view on of Palestinians.
Used to say the country's military response has gone too far. 74% versus 4%. Honestly, reading it now.
You call out the GDF community for being neo-Nazi? No, I said that there was a lot of weird comments in his chat. And there have been moments where I feel like he does the Jeffrey Sachs thing, where he will put the cart before the horse, or claim the tail is wagging the dog with his relationship. But I watched this video, and this video has nothing to do with that. But yeah, there are always like weird ass comments. He definitely doesn't moderate his comment section. And I think it's up.
Now I still can't believe it. And for that I feel incredibly naive. I guess it fundamentally altered what I believed about humanity, about people. It was genuinely horribly depressing. For me, it was a sign of the damage that's been done and the work that is ahead. Or maybe there are other ways to interpret it. It certainly was not a moment of optimism for me. Already in December of 2023, Human Rights Watch reported
GDF
the
is
Israeli government is
such a moron. By the way, I didn't say he's a neo-Nazi. I said I didn't like some of his commentary that I feel like relies too much. He's not pro-America by any means. We know that already. Okay? No one has ever blamed GDF for being pro-America. That's not real. Having said that, the part where I think it's concerning when you have a lot of comments, like, it wasn't just me. I think even Bad Empanada actually criticized him on that shit. Okay? It's true. Like, at a certain point, I mean, look, I don't moderate my chat either. Okay. But I have like moderation tools in terms of, or not moderate my chat. I moderate this chat, but I have certain moderation tools on YouTube that just like auto clocks stupid ass takes. And even then, it's not like a bunch of people that like are coming in from 4chan in the comment section.
Starvation of civilians as a method of warfare in the Gaza Strip, which is a Israeli forces are deliberately blocking the delivery of water, food, and fuel. By the new year, the images of destruction in Gaza were no less than apocalyptic, as we all clearly remember as it was widely reported. Owing to that, you'd have to go back to the Vietnam War to make a comparison, in the words of Mark Garlasco, who's frequently interviewed by news outlets for his unique expertise in weapons. He worked for U.S. intelligence, the United Nations, and Human Rights Watch, for which he investigated Israel's 2006 bombing of Lebanon. Other quotes from experts were similarly astonishing. In 2 months, we've had about the level of strikes in this tiny little area in Gaza as what we saw in Mosul and Raqqa combined, said Larry Lewis, research director at the Center for Naval Analyses and formerly the U.S. State Department's senior advisor on civilian harm. Even CNN in this article placed the number of as of January 2024 at nearly 25,000. 1 year after October 7th, many more tens of thousands had been killed. The number couldn't possibly be known for certain. A credible study from The Lancet, reported by the New York Times, said many tens of thousands more than the oft-cited but conservative Ministry of Health numbers. Gaza had...
The comment section under your India-Pakistan video is not good law. I know. I told you I don't moderate my shit. So when it gets brigaded like that, the India-Pakistan video was like crazily brigaded.
So destroyed that even the U.S. president was calling it a
demolition site. It's a pure demolition site.
But protests had erupted in Israel to end the so-called war. Real quick, why do I say so-called war? In Gaza, we certainly haven't seen regular warfare, obviously. Hamas has no regular army. But we've hardly seen what can be called an asymmetric conflict. It's important to note that numberless Gazans have bravely resisted the Israeli military despite unimaginable and impossible odds, including the following. The Palestinians in Gaza have been hermetically sealed inside without any way out. They have no peripheral sanctuary state for which to regroup and rearm themselves. They are completely trapped. They've had to dig tunnels going underground to find a sanctuary. This, in a strip of land the size of Philadelphia, that also holds an entire civilian population. Of course, the existence of this small strip is a result of the Nakba, as some 70% of the population are not from Gaza, but are refugees from that took place, particularly in the cleansing operations, that's what they were called, in Isdud, Ascalon, Beersheba, and throughout the Negev.
Dalit.
So, Gazans are fighting from a place that is in no way conducive for combat, for reasons completely out of their control. The Israeli onslaught that began on October 7th was a culmination of lessons learned in previous destruction. We can clearly see how the so-called wars of 2008 and 9 and 2014 were punitive rather than driven by military necessity. Tank crews spent their time firing their cannons at buildings and destroying civilian infrastructure. Said a soldier who took part in the 2008-9 Operation Cast Lead, "Go ahead and ask soldiers how often they encountered combatants in Gaza. Nothing." The interviewer, "When you entered the Gaza Strip, there was no resistance?" Next to none at all. Following Cast Lead, veteran defense analyst Amos Harel quoted a squad leader who said, "The atmosphere in general, from what I understood from most of my men who I talked to, the lives of Palestinians, let's say, is something very, very less important than the lives of our soldiers." The Independent quoted a junior officer who served at a brigade headquarters during the operation, who described the new rules of engagement policy following the announcement of the notorious Dahia doctrine of disproportionality as one of literally zero risk to soldiers. Just take this dozer operator. Our objective was to demolish houses. We were secured by heavy armored personnel carriers.
Where's your brain? He's for the working man. If you worked in middle class, you'd understand. No, you're right. Totally. The working class is winning big with the totally unreasonable explosion of global trade. When Donald Trump dumped $15 billion worth of munition on Yemen, or not Donald Trump, but every other administration prior to that as well, including Donald Trump, Trump 1 and also Trump 2, he was doing that for the working class. He was like, I'm bombing Yemen for middle America. Did you feel it when he did that? Or when he wanted to decouple global trade from China, the manufacturing hub that we designed, by implementing a tariffs regime, which is a tax on you, a sales tax. Did you feel that? He was doing it for you, baby.
and tanks. In this case, the tanks were assigned
I
to
don't want
us
alarm
rather
if
than the
Kaya is
other way
melting.
around.
Yes, she is.
The area was completely empty. Everything was empty. Interviewer, ghost town, not a soul in sight? Yes. We demolished a lot. There were people who had been in Gaza for 2 days, constantly demolishing one house after the other. And we're talking about a whole battalion. In a separate interview, a soldier is asked, did you happen to escort bulldozers demolishing?
No, I know his original. Wait, what? GDF is for Gaddafi. I know. It's not some anti-Semitic play on IDF like some people claim. Oh, no, I know that. Guys, I've been an early fucking supporter of GDF far before. When GDF initially started, he started on TikTok. And I supported his channel before he even had a YouTube channel. I supported him as a TikToker when he used to make food videos and then bait food TikToks into talking about like war crimes that America was committing. Another TikToker that I also supported like that is what's his name? It's Eric, right? I don't want to get his name wrong. He's great. Eric Hovagim. He does GeoGuessr baits in the same way as GDF started off with. There's a couple channels like this that I've been a big supporter of from the jump. And yes, I know GDF stands for Gaddafi. Yeah, Eric is another HasanAbi head. Chris Kunzler is it's just Ethan Klein fans trying to catch you. Mike from PA already addressed this. Wait, what? Trying to catch me for what? Yeah. Eric is great. Chris Kunzler is great. But yeah, early HasanAbi heads will remember early on GDF before he had a fucking 356,000 subscriber channel. Used to be a TikTok account that kept getting banned over and over again. Fuck you and fuck Cinna Cuh. Cinna gang ho. What? The cinephiles are in here. Got a problem, Cuh? West LA? Never. Never that. West LA, bitch. Repping, good boy. Repping West LA, Cuh. West LA is so funny. It's like that one chatter who was like, meet me in San Jose. Meet me at the San Fernando Valley, bitch. All right, let's keep going.
Houses? Do you know what they destroyed? Why? How many? If they didn't like the looks of some house, if it disturbed or threatened them, then it would be taken down. Interviewer. But that was for operational needs? Operational needs, I don't know, maybe half of them. Sometimes the company commander would give the D9 something to demolish just to make them happy. This isn't to mention the demolition and damage carried out by shelling. One participant of the 2014 carnage, a first sergeant of the engineering corps, said, I got the impression that every house we passed on our way got hit by a shell. And houses farther away too. It was methodical. There was no threat. They were spraying every house with machine gun fire the whole time, and once in a while blasting a shell into each house. A first sergeant in the Armored Corps recalls, we were all firing a lot when there wasn't any need for it, just for the sake of firing. We were firing purposelessly, all day long. Hamas was nowhere to be seen. This can hardly be called warfare. These were brief, one-sided punishment campaigns.
Funny bait.
Israeli civilian and military commanders seemingly acknowledge this with their oft-repeated phrase, mowing the lawn or cutting the grass, which also alludes to its routine nature. Yosi Glausius explains the phrase very helpfully
or cutting the tall trees. This is a recent piece that was written on May 6th. I read pieces of it.
In a rage-filled opinion article. She had seen eclairs in a bakery in Israel that read, let the IDF mow them down. The Hebrew word written on the eclairs means mow, as in to lawn mow, but mowing is also a euphemism for something more brutal. Mowing the grass is a term popularized in 2013 to refer to Israel's strategy of attrition designed primarily to debilitate the enemy capabilities. To put it more crudely, mowing the grass means bombing Gaza periodically to facilitate temporary quiet for Israel. This desire to punish the civilian population at large was explicitly articulated and the policy solidified following Israel's strategic defeat in the Second Lebanon War. Giora Island is former national security advisor to Ariel Sharon and Ehud Olmert. Before this, he was head of the IDF's planning and operations branches. He now continues writing policy prescriptions in opinion pieces, particularly for Ynet and their affiliated NOT HasanAbi. You'll know his so-called general's plan to starve North Gaza. He's the general.
Surrender or to die in starvation. This is the all simple plan, which is fully consistent with all...
Dude, is literally siege warfare. Like, this is from a time... It's crazy watching, like, Genghis Khan tactics being implemented with modern weapons. You know what I mean? Like, the only country that does this is outside of Israel is like, I feel like it's, I don't know. I just, Like, even America had more tact when they were doing their fucking ethnic cleansing of Iraq. You know what I mean?
all the international demands and fully consistent with the law of the armed conflict.
That the military quickly began implementing the plan is a testament to his influence in the Israeli defense establishment.
Eran Etzion was deputy head of Israel's National Security Council until 2008.
The ousted defense minister Gallant denied on camera that the government is actually implementing this plan. Netanyahu denied it also in a closed session with Secretary of State Blinken. And then when asked by Blinken to say it publicly, Netanyahu refused.
Back in 2008, he wrote that in the event of another war with Lebanon, the suffering of hundreds of thousands of people are consequences that can influence Hezbollah's behavior. Israel's most recent offensive began with bombing, starting on October 7th. The ground invasion didn't begin until the 27th. This was accompanied by a further tightening of the siege, which had already been in place for some 17 years. Hasan Alian, head of COGIT, the agency responsible for facilitating aid
This is the fucking craziest shit.
distribution, said plainly that these measures were revenge for October 7th.
مع هيك وحوش بشريه رايحين نتعامل كيف لازم. اسرائيل فرضت اغلاق كامل على غزه ومش راح يكون في عندكم كهرباء ولا مي بس دمار. بدكم جهنم راح تحصلوا على جهنم.
And echoing the Arab, by the way, echoing the sentiment of Yoav Gallant, defense minister.
Sense of retribution.
His job is literally to distribute aid. Like, his job is to manage aid into Gaza.
And revenge must have fueled the other measures with regard to targeting. Yagil Levi, writing in Haaretz, challenges Israel's oft-repeated distinction as the world's most moral army. To reduce the risk even further during the ground offensive, air and artillery attacks preceded the entry of the ground forces into every area and accompanied them during the ensuing fighting. In the words of a reserve combat soldier who entered the city of Beit Hanun and published an opinion piece anonymously in Haaretz, the level of destruction we saw was biblical, and our contribution to it was nil. Air, artillery, and engineering forces that preceded us and hit buildings from a distance prepared the ground for us so that we could enter with minimal risks. As a result, as of October 7th, 2024, Israel had lost 349 soldiers in the ground operation. A paltry 2% of the Israeli claim of 17,000 Hamas combat casualties. As Levi points out, however, this was simply the number of men killed, according to Gaza's Ministry of Health. They had all been labeled combatants. The Ministry of Health's numbers are conservative, however. An analysis published in The Lancet and reported in the New York Times says they may have undercounted traumatic war-related deaths by 40%. The number may have reached over 70,000 by the end of 2024. Worse yet, the analysis did not account for other war-related casualties, such as deaths from malnutrition, waterborne illness, or the breakdown of the health system as the conflict progressed.
World's worst military. Like, they're only good at baby killing. Like, that's it. They're only good at bombing a territory that they have deprived of aid, food, water, electricity that they control. That's it. A complete and permanent siege.
That this could be called a war is patently absurd. Israeli leaders have made their targeting and punishment of the civilian population known with their widely reported statements. Already by June of 2024, some 70,000 tons of bombs were dropped on a piece of land less than half the size of New York City. That number is more than were dropped on Dresden, Hamburg, London in World War II. Combined, the massive destructive power, with 2,000-pound bombs being common, erased entire towns. Amos Harel, chief defense correspondent for Haaretz, went to Jabalia and took photos and reported that the town, previously home to 100,000 people, was gone. Others shared the same fate, as described by Ahmad Tibi, one of the few Palestinian members of the Israeli Knesset. Entire towns.
Wait, what does this have to do with Ethan Law? Nothing. That's the point. It's bait.
Like Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia.
I'm not showing you this because he fucking brought up Ethan in the first 30 seconds and then never again. That's the whole point of the video. I wouldn't watch it if it was about Ethan.
And Jabalia have been wiped off the face of the earth in bombings by the IDF. Cities comparable in population size to Herzliya and Dimona have been bombed into rubble. And the world, with its silence and its armaments and its material support, is supporting this. The media in Israel wobbles between total denial and depicting the actions as heroic, justified, essential deeds. We have arrived at an absurd rule. Nothing justifies October 7th, but in the name of October 7th, everything is justifiable. There is no security justification for such massive bombing. No military action can justify bombing helpless human beings or the eradication of Beit Lahia, Beit Hanun, and Jabalia from the face of the earth. This ethnic cleansing is reminiscent of the ethnic cleansing of 530 villages in 1948. In the Jewish Israeli public, voices of protest and resistance are hardly audible. Israeli outlets reported on Netanyahu scuttling negotiations, and it was an open secret that he did so in order to placate his ministers. A hostage deal would cause his government to collapse, and so Israel was effectively being run by the government's most fanatical ministers. Israel's left wing was furious and made as much known. My impression was that, certainly not all, but many Israelis had had enough. Also a year after October 7th, the Israeli Democracy Institute released a report on the public mood. On ending the so-called war, it was only an even split among Israeli Jews. And not even really. Only 45% wanted an end, 43% didn't, and 12% were no help at all. Of course, the better part of all Palestinians wanted it to end, which added several percentage points to that camp. I wrongly believed the calls to end hostilities was a broad and popular movement among Israeli Jews. The protests were large and widely reported on, but they were far more partisan than I had realized. Worse yet, however, were the reasons that this sector of society had for ending the so-called war. A little more than half said for the safety of the hostages. This amounted to the most common reason. The second was because they could focus on another war with Lebanon. Then it was that the fighting achieved what it could, 9% didn't know why, and 6% because of the great cost in human life and the desire for quiet, peace, and security. And 2% said for improved relations with the U.S. Someone who's been grappling with Israeli society's moral decline has been Rachel Fink. She illustrates poignantly a personal crisis for her upon seeing Israeli news coverage showing desperate, starving people in Gaza. On Sunday evening, when Channel 12's main news broadcast featured some of the most gut-wrenching footage coming out of Gaza, hungry children clamoring around a soup ladle in desperation, I felt for a moment a sense of relief. Finally, I thought. Finally, an Israeli journalist has made the brave and morally virtuous choice to do his job, to report the truth. That feeling lasted right up until said journalist, Elad Simchayoff, began to speak. Because it turned out that this wasn't a segment about Israel's failure to uphold international law or protect civilian life. It was a report about Israel's failure to sell the war properly. Not a failure of policy, a failure of branding. As I watch, I experience a kind of emotional whiplash. Time and again, Simchayoff starts a sentence that sounds like there might be a moral reckoning coming, and it ends with a plea for better PR. But it is also possible to wonder if perhaps it is time to improve our, Simchayoff begins contemplatively, humanitarian policies, accountability, Hasbara efforts with skilled spokespeople, a clear and effective strategy and believable information, he declares. That's not a punchline, it's his game plan. For much of Simchayoff's report, as his voice...
I think there's a sea of depravity here, but I think one of the most glaringly obvious displays that this is brought about in the Western world is how little our leaders in the Western world care about the Democratic majority's opinions on the matter. Like, yeah, Israeli society wants this to continue or wants it to end for selfish reasons at most, okay? And not for the sake of the humanity of the Palestinians. Fine. It's a fascist country. It is what happens when you completely succumb to an exterminationist, ethnic, religious supremacist ideology. One should take note of that heading down the direction of our country here as well, okay, with all the white nativist anti-immigrant sentiment flying around with no pushback whatsoever, okay? Before you know it, the America that you thought you were living in will be lost to you, okay? And you'll go, how did this happen? I just wanted to have, you know, endless empire, but with like gay stuff, and then now they're taking my gay stuff away too. How could this have happened? That is a struggle that Israeli society had to take turns with in 2018. That's why they were doing those mass protests. They were like, whoa, hold on. Like, yeah, we're an apartheid, but we're a gay apartheid. Fucking chill. Turns out, nope. More reactionary elements completely seize control over the government. And did you retire IRL streams? When are they coming back? No more slop. The fuck? Slop? I did an IRL stream yesterday. But taxi content is one of your best. I agree. It's like you get home and everyone decided to be weird again. I mean, kind of. But what was I saying? Yeah, Americans should take note of what has taken place in Israeli society. How's your pathetic ass not permabanned yet? Okay, I assume, did Asmongold end his stream or something? Is that what's going on? What's happening? Immediately there is a shit ton of new chatters in the chat instantly. Did he fucking end his stream? Oh my God. He did. Oh my God. Why are you a terrorist though? Oh my God. That is fucking hilarious. The moment that Asmongold ends the stream, the roaches scatter around to come here to just fucking come in here and be like, dude, you're a fucking terrorist and I hope you get perma-banned, you fucking idiot. I mean, welcome. I can't believe this just happened. Welcome to the broadcast, everybody. Maybe you can accidentally learn a thing or two about what real terrorism looks like, you know, what Israel is doing.
Plays off camera, B-roll footage of starving Palestinians begging for flour and prized buildings runs in a loop. When it cuts back to anchorwoman Yonit Levy, she sums up the segment with a single line. "Those are the images being shown to the world," she says, with clear disdain. How many different kinds...
You're not a terrorist? You're a terrorist supporter? No, I do not support Israel. Nor do I support America's support for Israel.
Of delusional do you have to be to air horrifying footage of human suffering beneath a voiceover lamenting the challenges of public relations? What does it say about a society when you can look at a child, sunken-eyed and silent with fear and grief, and decide the real injustice is that she's hogging the spotlight? We're now entering a third month of a complete and total blockade of all aid into Gaza. This includes food and medicine, everything. Nothing has been allowed into Gaza for months now. Additionally, back in April, Nir Hasan wrote that Gazans are experiencing a severe water shortage, which has worsened since approximately a week ago when the Israeli Defense Forces struck the main water pipeline into the Shijaya neighborhood of Gaza City. Because of damage to the city's other water sources, the pipeline provided about 70% of the water consumption there. Now, why does it matter that Israeli society is characterized by a culture of dehumanization? It matters because it contextualizes the issue, and it contextualizes Israel's treatment of Palestinians, as well as their dismissiveness of Palestinians and their suffering. Its real-world consequences are apparent in Yagi Levy's Haaretz piece. The revenge impulse, accompanied by the notion that no one in Gaza is innocent, meant that those whose lives are perceived as lacking in value were put at even higher risk, and may even have led to a consequence of the fact that conscription into the military is mandatory in Israel, which blurs the lines between the public mood and that of the military.